Hey, fellow storytellers, let me ask you a question. How confident are you that your content actually connects in every market? If you're guessing, it might be time to check out Phrase. Phrase is the industry-leading AI localization platform that helps you deliver content in multiple languages without losing your tone, your message, or your mind. It automates the manual work, slashes review time, and gives you real data on what's working where. Brands like Uber and Zendesk trust Phrase to scale their content across the globe and get it right every time. If you're serious about reaching more people and driving better results internationally, head over to phrase.com/MPN and take a look. That's phrase.com/MPN.
Hey, Fidelity. What's it cost to invest with the Fidelity app?
Start with as little as $1 with no account fees or trade commissions on U.S. stocks and ETFs.
That's music to my ears.
I can only talk.
Investing involves risk, including risk of loss. Zero account fees apply to retail brokerage accounts only. Sell order assessment fee not included. A limited number of ETFs are subject to a transaction-based service fee of $100. See full list at fidelity.com/commissions. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC, member NYSE, SIPC.
Welcome to Storylines Live, the only podcast that explores the meaning and the power of the most important story in business. The one that answers why somebody would buy from you, work for you, invest in you, or partner with you. This is the story that defines the very character and nature of an organization. At WordWrite, we call this your capital S story. In each episode of Storylines Live, we feature guests who have great insights on storytelling, who can share their experiences and key learnings to help you and your business do a better job of sharing your capital S story to deliver remarkable business results. Today, we're honored to have Jim Hunt of Amazing Cities as our guest, talking about branding in cities, specifically in what Jim calls entrepreneurial cities. And this is a subject that Jim knows quite a bit about because he spent something close to 30 years as an elected official, as a mayor and council member in local government, and that wasn't enough for him. He also got involved in nonprofit management and ran several organizations, including the West Virginia Housing Development Fund. And he's been in and around local government after leaving elected office. He was president of the National League of Cities one year, and today he is a co-founder and leader of Bearing Advisors, which does quite a bit of work with local governments. And last but not least, he's a multiple-time author. And for those of you on YouTube, you're already seeing this. I am holding up his latest book, third book, right, Jim?
Right.
Okay. It's called The Entrepreneurial City, and it's a great book, as well as his first two, The Amazing City, 7 Steps to Creating an Amazing City, and Bottom Line Green, How America's Cities Are Saving the Planet and Money, too. Jim, welcome to Storylines Live.
Well, thanks, Paul. I'm honored to be a guest.
Oh, it's Jim's a busy guy. It's taken a while to get him on, but we're really excited for the topic in this episode. Anything in your biography that I missed that you feel that our audience should hear about?
Well, just for my colleagues at the West Virginia Housing Development Fund, I didn't run it. I was one of the integral keys in there, but that was a fun part of my life, and I've just had a blessed career. It's been just one good thing after another. I've just really been fortunate.
Yeah, that is so great, Jim. And thanks for correcting me on that. You got to watch these crazy storytellers. They might try and embellish things every now and then. Speaking of stories, though, Jim, we always ask our guests on Storylines Live about their capital S story. And which of those 4 questions that I described at the top of this episode is most important for you today? Having people buy from you, work for you, invest in you, or partner with you? What's the right one for you?
I think partnership is really the key for me, is that in what I've found over most of my career, and especially the last 14 years when I've been in business and consulting and speaking and traveling around, you recognize that you really need partners, that this isn't about just because you can feel like a pretty much of a lone ranger when you're in the work that I'm doing now. And if you don't look to create partnerships, it's a pretty lonely existence, and you'll find yourself in remote airports and in remote conference centers. And so I've really looked at making that a goal, is that when I go somewhere, when I speak to a group and all, is that I look for partners and partnerships and adding to my network. And it's really been I look at it and I think, my goodness, I should have been doing this more intently most of my life, but now it just really shows some real true blessings out of that.
That's great, Jim. And I have to say that from the storytelling perspective, that's an audience. Pretty much any kind of organization that we've had the pleasure of working with, partnerships is a critical audience that folks need to think about. And the way you describe that is just great. I really appreciate that. Now, this is not a political statement, but I think that no matter where you are on the political spectrum, you can agree that being in local government is not something that's easy to do. Jim, could you share with our audience what led you to get into local government in the first place?
Well, and part of that story started when I was a young boy. My father worked in the Public Works Department of the city of Clarksburg, West Virginia's Public Works Department. And so I learned city government from kind of the inside at the dinner table. And a lot of the pieces that really were in my head as I entered into elected office was really the story of my father and how he would come home, and he would point out with pride things in the city that no one was paying attention to, but and I just remember one in particular. He drove us down an alley in town, and he was a heavy equipment operator, and he ran the grader, and he took us down the alley and he showed us. He said, "Look at this alley." He said, "You should have seen it before when I got here," because he said there's weeds growing everywhere. The gravel was humped up in the middle, and the cars would practically hit. And he said, "I want you to look at it now." And it looked like an airport runway. And wow. So although that'll never go down, they'll never put a plaque on that alley for what was done there. But it taught me a lot of the facets that I put in the amazing city, which was attention to detail and motivation and why people do what they do in local government. Because as we know, national governments come and go, and there be, what we're talking about today will be in the history books 10 years from now.
Yes.
But state government, much the same, state legislatures do a lot of stuff that some people like, some people don't. But local government is really where you have people, people that you see in the grocery store, in church, on the street, and so forth, and events. And, if you're in local government, you recognize that you're dealing with people. You can solve a problem when someone walks up to you and says, "Jim, there's a pothole in front of my house," or there's, grass growing at my neighbor's house and we're getting rodents coming in. That day, you can have an impact on that person's quality of life. Wow. And I always felt, as I traveled around my city, I said I had my dad's eyes, that I would look for stuff, a sign that might have been graffitied or faded. And so I would jot down those. And then when technology, and this dates me, but when technology got to where you could have those little cassette recorders, I carried one with me. And then obviously, as technology has grown, we have a phone and a camera and a recorder and all this stuff in our pockets now. And I think that a local government official today, if they're doing it right, they won't have any time for, excess things, because it is now a ability to instantly work for your constituents. And I think that's the key to local government.
Wow, that is fascinating. I love that story about your dad, Jim. And obviously, you went on to be an elected city council member in Clarksburg, and later the mayor. While you were mayor of Clarksburg, you've been active in the National League of Cities as an elected official and after your time in elected office. But you became president of the NLC while you were mayor of Clarksburg. Is that accurate?
We elect our mayor off of council. So there's 7
Mhm.
elected council members. We meet on July 1st every 2 years, and we will elect a mayor from one of the 7.
Mhm.
So I always tell people, I said, they think, what was the election like, Jim? And I said, well, I only needed 4 votes, but those 4 votes are tough to get at times. But so I was a council member for 25 of my years and a mayor for 2. And I think it was a little bit that when I became mayor, it's kind of like the PGA championship at Oakmont, is that once you win it, it's in the record books forever. So I was mayor, had a great tenure as mayor, and a lot of good things happened during that period. But I always look at local government is that if you're not a team player, whoever the mayor is one of the team. And so I was a team member for 25 years and a council member or a mayor for 2. But during that time, after I became mayor, I recognized that, my time, I had a full-time job with the West Virginia Housing Development Fund. Plus, I was getting active. I had been president of my state municipal league in West Virginia. And then I was kind of working the different committees and activities at the National League of Cities. And being mayor didn't help my city at that point, and it didn't help me allocate my time. So I was one of the few council members in the history of the National League of Cities ever to be, from a council perspective, a councilman. Mostly it's, we've had people from Cleveland, New York City, Washington, D.C., Indianapolis, Los Angeles, and then I was the only one ever from West Virginia to serve as an officer at the National League of Cities, and one of the smallest communities ever to be have a president of the National League of Cities coming from that. But, and people said, how were you successful, Jim? And I said, because I did what I do at home. It's building partnerships, it's building networks, it's working, it's doing the grunt work when no one else wants to do it. I'd tell my wife, I'd get in the car and she'd say, where are you going this week? And I said, the National League of Cities wants me to go to Virginia for a think tank type meeting, which most people would have avoided like the plague. And I got in my car and went. So I worked my way through it. But it was when I stood up there in front of the organization, I represented many more people from small towns that had never had a voice in the National League. So they have a voice, but they've never had leadership, somebody they could look up and say, that guy's in a smaller city than mine. And he's, so that was really the kind of the NLC part of my story. And believe you me, for a person from a small town in West Virginia to be sitting next to the mayor of Washington, D.C., Tony Williams, and Bart Peterson was the mayor of Indianapolis. That was the 2 bookends when I was president. One was immediate past president, and the other was up and coming president.
Wow.
But, it's just a unique opportunity. I got to do a good bit of travel international to work with the United Cities and local governments. And so it just opened the door for me to stuff that I would have never had that opportunity without.
Well, Jim, you must have done something right because NLC gave you a Lifetime Achievement Award some years after you were president. So congratulations on that. Obviously, Jim, is a 3-time book author. You understand storytelling, and you're on a podcast with me where the focus is storytelling. And I've given our audience our definition of storytelling. Jim, what's your definition of storytelling?
Well, that's a good question, Paul, because the reason I love the storytelling part is that I'm going down to Mississippi, to Biloxi, to do the Mississippi Municipal League meeting in July. And, when you do a speech, it's a long process. So last year they called me and said, Jim, would you be available to do the speech? And then we want to know what you'd talk about, how it fits in, all that. And I always tell them, I said, I'm a storyteller, is that I don't have, even when I do my 7 steps to creating an amazing city, it's really 7 stories to creating an amazing city. And that's a little bit with the entrepreneurial city. All the work that I've done is that there are stories out there that define what your point is. And I really, a lot of times people ask you, do you have a PowerPoint? And I said, listen, I have a PowerPoint. It's the one you're seeing in the backdrop of the podcast
video here, yes.
but what happens is that, your life is a story and the people you meet are a story. And so I look at it from a standpoint that connecting with people in local government, you have to have those stories. You have to relate to them, and they have to know that when I tell the story of my dad getting called on Christmas Eve to go out because it was snowing, and he shoveled the cinders off the back of the truck and would come in, and the reason he did it was because of the overtime and the fact that it was making his family's Christmas better. When I was 10 years old, I didn't know that. But now that I reflect on it, to do what he did in terms of that city, it served the purpose that every restaurant that was open the next day, every store that was open, everybody that got to go visit their families and all, was really in some part a result of my dad getting away from his family at Christmas to give the gift of that travel and all in a local town and clean the streets. So those are the type of stories that people know. I lived it, and people out there every day in local government, a police officer, a firefighter, and all, they get so much criticism. But when you tell their stories, those stories relate to people because they understand what it means to safely go out on New Year's Eve and not get hit by a drunk driver.
Exactly.
There are reasons that public employees, that in many cases, they're not popular. But when you call and your house is on fire and that truck comes up, those guys are sleeping in a building. They get away from their families, their kids, and missing ball games and all this stuff. And yet that's the purpose of what they do. And when you put a face on those public employees, which is what I try and do, I'm the lucky one. I was mayor. I get to run the meetings and stuff. But the people that make the work go is the ones that those stories, I think, have the most relevance.
Boy, Jim, so well said. Folks, we're going to take a brief break here, and we come back. We are going to talk about two things in particular. One, Jim's important discussion in his latest book about cities and branding, and two, what he does to help cities on a regular basis in his consulting work. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Raise the rudders! Raise the sails! Raise the sails!
Captain, an unidentified ship is approaching. Over.
Roger. Wait, is that an enterprise sales solution?
Reach sales professionals, not professional sailors. With LinkedIn ads, you can target the right people by industry, job title, and more to reach the professionals who are more likely to find your ad relevant. Plus, with 1 billion members on LinkedIn, that means you'll have access to 130 million decision makers and 10 million C-level executives. That's a lot of millions of the right people. Get started today and see how you can reach the right buyers with LinkedIn's enhanced targeting tools. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Go to linkedin.com/MPN to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/MPN. linkedin.com/MPN. Terms and conditions apply.
Welcome back, folks, to this episode of Storylines Live with Jim Hunt of Bearing Advisors and the Amazing Cities, several-time author and local government elected official who has a particularly great take on the importance of branding, aka stories, and cities. And Jim, I'd kind of like to pick up our discussion from before the break right there. Your latest book, The Entrepreneurial City, you have an entire chapter that's devoted to the concept of branding cities. Could you share with our audience why you feel that's so important?
Yeah, Paul, branding, as I describe it, because and I know you work a lot with businesses.
Yes.
And branding for a business is something that some brands put in millions of dollars to redesign their logos, and the storefronts, and the McDonald's does a complete, turnover every 7 years, whatever. And, it started me to thinking, and I've always had this entrepreneurial feel. It started a trip to China that I took years ago with the National League of Cities. And I was in Beijing and I was walking along the sidewalks and I looked up and I saw these globes on the streets that were mainly for pedestrians. They were on the sidewalks and they lit up and they were these beautiful big white globes.
Wow.
And they had a big KFC on the globe. And as I'm walking, we had translators with us, and the young lady was with me, and I said, "Hey, could you answer something for me?" And she said, "Yes. What is it?" And I said, "Those globes there, they have KFC on them. Could you tell me what that means?" And she looked at me like strange, and she said, "Well, that's Kentucky Fried Chicken." And I thought, now here in the downtown in Beijing, communist country, if you will, anti-capitalist, obviously.
Yes.
And here I come from the United States, where if a city decided to do something like that, the people would be in an uproar. It's like, oh, you can't, do this. This is, too much of a mix between the public sector and the private sector and all.
Yes.
But it kind of taught me a lesson, is like cities have an obligation for their own brands. Yeah. So when you look at, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, the Steel City, it has a brand that is worldwide. Yes. And as I travel around, when I tell people, and generally, if they want to know where I'm from, I have to say I'm 2 hours from Pittsburgh is what my description is. But they'll say, the Steelers, they'll say, the Penguins. It's just a fantastic thing that the city of Pittsburgh has, and it's something that's well crafted. If you do it wrong, and let's say you decide to go in a different direction from where the public is, it creates this questioning, is that maybe I got Pittsburgh, Kansas instead of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I'll use another example too, and I talked about it in the book on the websites. Cities have this odd thing, and I hope that anybody listening, and they look at their local cities' websites and they don't have this on there, call them and tell them. But I'll go on the website. I spend an inordinate amount of time on local government websites. And you'll go in and you'll see a city that you're looking for. Let's use the example, Athens, Georgia. Right. So you'll go on to the website and you see Athens, welcome to Athens, Athens, a great city, all this, mayor, council member, and I start going through it. I might spend 3 minutes on that website before realizing I was looking for Athens, Ohio.
There you go.
And without, so people feel like, oh, geez, the website will do it like we do the welcome to town sign.
Yes.
We'll say, welcome to Pittsburgh, welcome to Athens. But the reality is we're in a global enterprise. A local government today, if they're going to hire a new employee for the local government, if a business is going to employ a new person at their business that's going to transfer in, that they're interviewing, that visit to that city, the first time it's made will be through the internet.
Absolutely.
And the family who makes a big, important part of the decision to move to a place, when the kids are not, like a 14-year-old kid wants to know where he's going to school, what kind of ball team, can he still see the team play and all this stuff. So that kid goes onto the internet and he sees, oh my gosh, this place looks terrible. And he goes to his dad and the mother's then questioning, they're like, we can't move. And you lose an employee because of that. And the reality of it is you're in a global world, you're branding a community. And I use the example of the Savannah bananas in there, the Savannah, Georgia.
Yeah.
It's a global phenomenon now.
It really is.
And they have sold out now, I think, 5 NFL stadiums around the country. And people are wondering, Jesse Coles, the owner of it, kind of wears a yellow tuxedo. But here's the reality. I talked to Van Johnson, the mayor of Savannah, and I said, Van, how does this mix with the city of Savannah, the sedate South, the Southern mansions and all? And Van told me, he said, Jim, this is great. He said, our name is on a global platform of people that never grew up with, they're young people that were hitting a demographic that we love. How would you like to be attracting a business or employees or homeowners and citizens into a community that they're not worried about the old moss hanging on the tree. They're worried about going to a Savannah Bananas game and meeting them in the grocery store or at an event. So that's branding that I view. And I think there's so many opportunities. I was just last weekend actually in Normal, Illinois.
Yes.
And Normal, Illinois has kind of this unique advantage. Then I don't think they're fully taken. They do a great job. It's a wonderful city. But here's the thing. If I were living in the city of Normal, Illinois, there would not be a person in the world that didn't see a T-shirt that said, I'm normal. We do things. We're normal, or we're from normal, but we are a little abnormal. Taking on like the Austin, Texas, keep Austin weird.
That's right. Yeah.
And when you're able to drop that and say, have you ever been to Normal, Illinois? No, but I'd love to go there. Or yes, I recognize that Rivian has 8,000 employees in Normal, Illinois, which I had no idea of. But that's how you build the brand. It starts to creep into local events. It starts to creep into businesses that are from a place that they want to be proud of a place they're from. So those are the type of branding exercises that I like, and believe that the reception to the book's been fantastic because people are in the local government sphere are saying, I never thought of it like that. And I'm thinking, well, that's, I've lived my whole life wanting to, go around the places and say, geez, I'd love to live in Albuquerque, New Mexico, because it's got so many great things, one of which was Breaking Bad. And the Tip Top Car Wash in Breaking Bad, for those who have watched it, I went there when a business colleague of mine said, Jim, we're early for our meeting. Where would you like to go? I said, I'd like to see the Tip Top Car Wash.
I love that, Jim.
We jump in an Uber, we drive over, we're taking pictures in front of the Tip Top Car Wash, and we look over next to us. Here's another group taking selfies and so forth. And those are the type of opportunities that are, stuff a little bit different, but we're living in a world today with the internet, with TikTok, with all of the various ways that you have to separate yourself out from the norm in many ways.
Well, I gotta tell you, Jim, I loved everything you just shared. By the way, there's a Ben Folds song that talks about Normal, Illinois. So there's another reason why they ought to be having some fun with that. Folks, if you're in local government or you care about your local government, you really should take a look at The Entrepreneurial City. It's a great book. There's so many fascinating ideas in there. And I mean, what we're really talking about here is our communities, the places that we live, that we work, and everything, Jim, that you just shared with your employee example is true times 10, times 100 in terms of economic development and where companies want to site their new facilities and plants, et cetera, et cetera. It is just critically important big companies, when they're deciding where to build something, they'll have 2 or 3 choices. So what's going to make the difference? And I would say that the story makes the difference. And that's also, that's the brand too, right? That's exactly it. Jim, I don't think anybody can tell from being with you in this episode that you're a passionate person. So I almost feel silly asking this question, but what gives you the greatest satisfaction in your work today?
Well, I think it's, as I mentioned, my trip to Normal. The reason I was there, I was in Champaign, Illinois. And one of my good friends in local government, she's out of office now, but she lives in Normal, Illinois. And we'd spent years together and on the boards and different activities with the National League of Cities. And when she saw on social media that I was in Champaign, which is an hour drive from Normal, she said, Jim, I wish you'd have told me you were so close. I would have invited you to Normal. And so I said, well, I'll get there. I'm going to commit to you. I'll get back. And then I started thinking, like many people do, is that I might not get back. And she's up in years now. And I thought, I don't want that to be a legacy that I read it on Facebook that somebody passed away. So I looked at my schedule. I rearranged a couple of things. I had a tight afternoon flight around 2:30. So I said, how can I do it? I got an Uber, drove to Normal, Illinois, had a great story time with the West Virginia driver that was driving me to Normal.
Oh, wow.
went to Normal, met with we went to a breakfast meeting. I was there at 7 o'clock, first one there, and met with the former mayor, several former council people, and my friend Sonia. And she gave me a tour of the city and talked about the different aspects of it. I jumped back on an Uber with a fellow named Mohammed, who family owned a restaurant in Champaign.
Wow.
And traveled all over the world. We had a great conversation. And I said, now, what more could you do in life where other people are thinking, oh, geez, I'm stuck at the conference, I'm going to airports and all like that. And I said, it gave me one of the best stories, if you will, but
Yes.
I'll never forget that. And I'll never regret taking the time to do that. So I've kind of made a personal mission in my life that I'm not wealthy, but I can tell you, I don't need to worry about, the next few years. But I always believe that there's got to be more to life than just money or just, a boat or different things like this. And I said, traveling around and looking at cities, which is my passion, and touching base with those people you've met along the way.
Yes.
And trying to figure out what is it about them or their communities or what's happening with them. Where can I plug a little toothpick in the wall there? And it's when you go with that intent, you find in your life that you get up in the morning, and I'm going to be heading out to Ocean City, Maryland for a conference here on Sunday. When you're getting ready to go, it's not like saying, oh, another conference. It's like, what's the adventure that I get to experience? And I can tell you from my lifetime, it's exactly the way I thought it would be. I mean, it just has such a rewarding part of it.
Jim, that is just fascinating. I really appreciate you sharing that. If people want to get in touch with you, Jim, what's the best way for them to do that?
Well, it's very easy. and unlike many people, excuse me, I found that Jeff Bezos has more money than he needs, and he's taking people to space and all like that.
Yes.
So I figured that if I'm going to sell my book, I want to do it the way I live, which is person to person. And I'd like people to order the book off of www.amazingcities.org. Great. And you'll find a pretty good bit of information on me if you'd like me to speak somewhere or visit your town. And as you mentioned before, I love the idea. I did a leadership project down in Port St. Lucie, Florida. And I'd really not known Port St. Lucie prior to going there, but it's the 96th largest city in the country. Now, it's grown mysteriously because it's just been a series of more and more people going because housing is affordable or more affordable than other Palm Beach and that. But I got into something there, working leadership with them, where I fell in love with that community. And I just looked at it like, listen, and they're in my book, there's stories in there about it, but that's what I do. I love going someplace where you can have an impact, and then you fly back on a plane and you just think, this was a pretty neat way of making a living as you go. So, but all that being said, contact www.amazingcities.org. We'll put my email and phone number and all.
That'll be in the show notes, everybody.
People can contact me, but like I said, I'm looking, from my standpoint, you're looking for a partner if you want me. It's not, there's very little transactional stuff because as you well know, in your life, when somebody says, my good friend James Perkins, Mayor of Selma, Alabama, called me up, said, Jim, would you come down for the 50th anniversary of Bloody Sunday? And I said, I wouldn't be anywhere else. And I got it together and we cobbled all the stuff together. And I said, listen, I'll pay you to come down if you need to. So it was an experience I'll never forget, but that's the way I do business at this part in my life. I don't need to worry about what's the return on investment. Mine is what's the return on the interest and the enjoyment of getting to do the things that I do.
Jim, that is readily apparent from our conversation in this episode. I want to thank you, Jim, for being on this episode of Storylines Live. The electronic medium isn't quite there, but I certainly feel like I can feel your passion and enthusiasm radiating through the electrons, and I'm sure the audience feels the same way. And I want to say thank you to the audience for joining us for this episode of Storylines Live, the only podcast that explores the power and the meaning of the most important story in business, the one that answers why somebody would buy from you, work for you, invest in you, or partner with you. We'll see you next time on the next episode.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Hennika Watkis-Porter hosts The Entrepreneurial You, empowering entrepreneurs with insights on leadership, business, and success. Hennika, tell listeners what to expect from your show.
So we provide innovative business strategies and practical solutions to common entrepreneurial challenges.
And where can people subscribe?
Find us at hennikawatkisporter.com, as well as the Marketing Podcast Network at marketingpodcasts.net, or search for it wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe. This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.